Okay, well, moving on here then, we talked earlier about liquidation. We're going to move on to something else. And this is pretty much coming out of Chapter 2 of your book. What we want to do then again is talk a little bit about the two basic types, which is Chapter 7. We've talked about this, we've touched on it a few times. And Chapter 13, and this one is what we call liquidation. And this one is, we call it in common parlance, wage earner plan, okay? But the legal term for it is some form of reorganization, because there's a larger group of type of chapters that all involve reorganization. So that's why it's important. But I mean, those are two terms basically kind of cover the same basic thing. So that's what we're getting into on this. So the bankruptcy code that we're working with has been amended many times. It actually started on the books October 1st, 1979. Okay, the code has been significantly amended 1984, 1986, 1994, and 2005. Some of the things that were done in 2005 have had a significant impact on the liquidations and so forth, because people have to go now to some form of creditor kind of counseling and kind of make a decision about whether they would be better off in Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. Whereas in the past everybody was just kind of given the assumption that they were doing the right thing, that they were stuck in bad circumstances. But then there's this pervasive attitude out there that too many people were taking advantage of the system. There's all kind of counter arguments back and forth, but the creditors, using their lobbying forces, were able to prevail on the Congress to add these changes. Now, I think it's interesting, and I think it's important to look that there's significant time periods here between major changes in the code, and that is 1984. Notice right away 1986. What that usually means, it was some kind of a glitch, something they tried to do in 1984, it didn't work, so they found out within a couple years, so they had to change it to take care of that glitch. Then everything ran along smoothly till 1994, and then there was a significant change that took place in 1994. And then likewise, there was this groundswell of people saying that too many people are taking advantage, too much credit, bankruptcy's too easy, this type of thing. So there was a big change in 2005. Well, there was a big downturn in the economy in 2008. I'm sure you probably all remember that. And as a result of that, it wouldn't surprise me if there isn't some more significant changes made in the bankruptcy code sometime soon. There's a lot of other things going on, arguments about gun control, abortion, a lot of other different things, terrorism, wars, all over this type of stuff, so they get sidetracked, but sooner or later they're going to come back around to the bankruptcy code. So I would predict that sometime relatively soon we'll see some additional significant changes. What will happen? Who knows? They could tighten up even more on liquidations and sevens and try to force everybody over into a 13. I could see that happen eventually, where everybody has to make at least some effort to pay something on all their bills. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, I don't know, but I just know that there's been an ongoing attitude and pressure out there, just like about crime and some different things. There's a lot of misinformation that flows around regarding bankruptcy, and so it's very easy for the credit card companies and people like that to get their way with Congress because they have a lot of clout. So I could see something like that coming up soon. So it's important to keep these different words in mind. We need to, if nothing else, just have a series of these where I walk you through the different definitions of important words. So a creditor is an entity with a claim arising before the filing of a bankruptcy petition. So in other words, you owed the dentist for having your teeth fixed, and you've owed on it for a year. But then something else came up. You found out that you had heart trouble, so you couldn't work anymore, so you had to retire. Can't pay for your dental bill or your doctor bill. But all this stuff came up before you ever filed bankruptcy. Post-bankruptcy filing debt is not included in most cases in your bankruptcy, unless it's something discovered later that you either forgot about or was unknown to you. Somebody, like for instance in a divorce, took out bills in both names and it ended up, yes, you do owe that bill, but you were totally unaware of it. Your spouse took out the bill. You may be in a position where you should have included that in your bankruptcy. Well, if you had no knowledge, it's possible that you could reopen your bankruptcy, include that because the bill was actually incurred before the bankruptcy. Claims is another important word. A claim is a right to payment of any kind or the right to performance. Let's say that you're a contractor. You build houses. You get this house half built, but you can't pay your bills. You can't finish the house. You can't pay your workers, so you can't finish these people's house. So you walk off the job. So those people that own that house have a claim against you because let's say they came to you and paid you in advance, foolish, but they paid you to build them a house. And now you can't finish it because you can't work, you can't pay your workers, you can't do anything because something's happened that's caused you to not be able to follow through on your agreement. Bankruptcy basically is a way to undo contracts that are made between people, and only in cases where they feel that there is a good reason why what they thought they could do, let's say a year ago, they can't do now. Okay? A bill is a form of a contract. A promissory note, in other words, you promise to pay somebody money for whatever reason. It's kind of like a contract. Okay? Debtors. It's an entity that owes a debt, some kind of liability on a claim. Let's say that the debtor files a bankruptcy against whoever that they owe the debt to, or a creditor, let's say. Then that's a form of debtor. Another possibility is what we call an involuntary bankruptcy. Involuntary bankruptcy usually involves companies, corporations, but it is possible that someone could end up having an involuntary bankruptcy, let's say, filed against their business. Well, how would that happen? Well, what ends up happening is you're not able to pay, and yet someone's gotten ahead in line, and so what they do is they say, well, everybody ought to be treated the same. Everybody needs to be treated fairly. And so the involuntary bankruptcy is filled, I'll get it here. Fortunately, there's a eraser on the other end here. All right. Filed by creditors in this case. It's a little bit different scenario, but it's filed by creditors, okay? So what ends up happening then in an involuntary bankruptcy, person's unable to pay, so therefore they end up going into an involuntary bankruptcy in order that a trustee can step in and sort things out and try to figure out what would be fair for the people. Now, is this something that happens all the time? No, it's very rare. But what it is where someone has gotten an unfair advantage over the other creditors, so the other creditors kind of step in and try to put everybody on a level playing field. Okay? So, composition agreement. Now, this is another area where we get into a lot of problems there's test questions on this, and so it's something we probably ought to talk about. Composition agreement, okay? We want to define that, and then we want to also talk about another thing that gets confused in this sometimes. the composition agreement, okay? It's an agreement between a debtor and multiple creditors, okay? Multiple creditors. So it has to be an agreement where there's one debtor and let's say 12 creditors, 5 creditors, 10 creditors, whatever. So what is happening is you're marshaling your assets and you're saying, I'm going to pay on this bill in this composition agreement. Everybody's going to get X out of my paycheck every week. Okay, so let's say that everything over $100, let's say $900, going to be divided between 10 people. Well, what is that? Okay, so 900 divided by 10, what is that? $90, something like that. And so everybody gets a payment every week using this composition agreement. But the important critical word here that we want to keep in mind is multiple, always multiple creditors, okay? Never single, always just multiple, okay? Now what's the alternative to that? Reaffirmation agreement, okay? And there's a lot of confusion on this. And the problem that you get into with this is they get confused on the issue of multiple creditor versus single creditor, okay? Now the difference here is reaffirmation agreement, it can involve single creditors, okay? So just one. You want to pay your car off because you need your car to go to work, okay? You would file a reaffirmation agreement. You would not file a composition agreement, okay? So it's a transaction in a composition agreement where the debtor and the creditors figure out a way to pay off this bill in some manner. They may not pay the whole bill, but pay something on the bill, okay? So one example might be, well, you just get an extension to pay all your bills in 1 month. You know, hey, I've been real sick. I've had a real serious case of, let's say, gallbladder attack. So I had to be off work for 2 weeks and I wasn't able to get a check. I didn't get paid. So I'm going to need to push everything back by a month, let's say. So that's one way of doing it. It's a formal agreement that they just push everything back. And so you have an agreement that you were paying, you know, like X every month, but now you're not able to pay it because you've been sick. So you're going to pick up where you left off, maybe add another $15 to make up for the one that you couldn't pay, and then try to get caught up again over time, if you understand what I'm saying. Liquidation proceedings is non-exempt assets of a debtor are sold. Okay, so this is very important, and keep this in mind again, like I said, about your difference between composition agreements and reaffirmation agreements. If anywhere in there it says something about single creditors, then you are talking about a reaffirmation agreement. Okay, composition agreement is talking about multiple creditors. Okay, one debtor, multiple creditors. Now, liquidation proceeding, that's important. And that is where the trustee comes in and sells off stuff, takes possession of it, and sells it. And the bad thing about this can be that if they do a true liquidation, you know, they can sell stuff for pennies on the dollar. And then, like I said, things get paid based on a list of priorities. So the priorities are there. It's a form of ranking. And so that's rank, so from top to bottom. So, you know, what you may think is important, like, oh, this is my sister. I want to make sure my sister gets paid. Well, no, she's not a priority. Priorities, like I said, would be like employees. So you want to put your sister up here. No, not going to happen. Your sister's going down here. Okay? And then let's say your secretary goes up here. Okay? So that's important to keep in mind, that you can't jump the priority list just because, oh, well, it's my sister and I love her and I want her to get paid, okay? It's not going to happen, all right? If you're involved in anything with the trustee is going to make their own legal judgment based upon what the law says and not emotion, sympathy, or anything like that. Reorganization, like I said, your Chapter 13 is a form of reorganization. And so that's really important. But there are other forms, you know, like I said, large corporation, Chapter 11, okay? Railroad has their own section. Farmers have their own section. So these are things we'll talk about in more detail about. But a reorganization, what that is let's say that you owe, let's try to make it as simple as possible. Let's say that you owe on your car for 3 years, okay? And you get thrust into bankruptcy over some doctor bills or something like that. And you go back to the bank and you say, look, I'm in a bind and I need to take my car loan from 3 years to 5 years, 60 months. Not 36. Okay? So the reorganization, you could make a new agreement in that reorganization where you take that car loan from 36 months to 60 months. Now what does that do? Well, that lowers your payment. You end up paying more interest, but instead of paying, let's say, $300 a month on your car, let's say you're paying $175. So that frees up another $125 that you can pay on other bills. So you can see how this all gets worked out over time. Is you have to deal with each one of the creditors, figure out what can be done for them. If they want to play hardball too much, they may end up getting nothing. So it's pretty important for everybody to be collaborative, cooperative, and work together for the best agreement for all concerned. Okay, so basically that's it for Chapter 2. When we come back, we'll pick up with Chapter 3, and we'll talk to you a little bit about how to file a petition, how to get this started. When we get into Chapter 3, we're going to really get into nuts and bolts on how I want you to actually fill out the form, print the form, and so forth. When I say print the form, I do not mean print the form on paper. I mean print it to a PDF file, save it on your desktop, and then send it to me. So I don't want you mailing me papers in the mail or something like that. I want you to learn how to make a PDF, because making PDFs is what working in bankruptcy court is all about in 2013. So very important to learn how to make these PDFs, because everything you do in bankruptcy court is done in PDF. So part of the learning of this is for my convenience to be able to grade your papers on PDFs, and then you don't have to pay for a stamp to mail me something every week. And then the other part of it is it's a learned ability that you need to know is how to save a document to PDF. And so we'll cover that in Chapter 3 in just a few minutes.